Guys, I finally finished the Throne of Glass series! Woohoo! Hello, I'm Steph, aka Literati Medium. Today it's time for my long-awaited November wrap-up and December TBR. If you watched my last video, you know that I've been in a little bit of a mental health slump. However, that did not affect my reading. It only affected my channel. And I think a lot of that has to do with when I get really down, I tend to use escapism as a coping mechanism, either through books or movies. So that's why this month I read 8 full-length books and 1 short story. The first book that I read this month was Defy the Stars by Claudia Gray. Earth and Genesis have been at war for a long time. Noemi is a Genesis pilot who is trying to help her friend on an abandoned spaceship where she runs into an advanced artificial intelligence named Abel. Her training tells her that she needs to kill him. However, her instincts are telling her that she needs him to survive. I chose this as my Knight of Swords reversed prompt from my TBR from last month because, and this isn't really a spoiler because it's revealed very, very early in the book, you find out that Abel has been on this abandoned ship for 30 years and thus stagnant. If you watched my Halloween TBR from last month, you'd know that I'm becoming a little bit of a Claudia stan girl. And this book is probably the reason why. I absolutely loved this book from beginning to end. Noemi is a great female protagonist with a lot of spunk, and Abel is one of the most precious characters that I've read in a book. He is an artificial intelligence, but yet something about him makes him seem so much more human than anybody else, really. The tension between the two characters is great and changes and evolves and grows throughout the course of the book. This book was pretty much perfect for me. The ending made me cry, but not in a bad way. I was just empathizing with Abel so much by the end of the book that I couldn't help but be moved to tears by what happened. This book was so perfect for me that I'm actually a little worried about continuing the trilogy because I'm worried that the other 2 books are going to mess it up. So I don't think it's any surprise that I ended up rating this book 5 stars. The next book that I read this month was It's a Wonderful Death by Sarah J. Schmitt. When 17-year-old RJ is accidentally collected by a Grim Reaper, she's given 2 choices. Either stay in the afterlife lobby until her original timeline runs out, or go back to 3 different moments in her life and change the outcomes so that she can prove that her life is worth saving. This book was cute. Although I did cringe every single time the author used the word gypsy. Dear writers, gypsy is a derogatory term. Please stop using it. RJ is an incredibly selfish girl at the beginning of the book with serious Karen vibes. That being said, as her journey goes on, you do see her transform into a more likable person. My main complaint is that the tasks almost seemed a little too easy. There was no surprise to them. You find out pretty early on what those 3 moments are going to be, and then when she goes back and changes them in the obvious way, you're just like, well, yeah, of course, that's what you did. That means there actually isn't a lot of inner conflict throughout the book. It's almost more like she's going back and changing things she regrets rather than changing mistakes she made. I can honestly say that I did not see the end coming, thus it did emotionally impact me. There were tears. There were lots of tears. So I rated this book 3 stars. I'd be interested to read more by Sarah Schmitt. The third book that I read this month was my Book of the Month Club book from October, The Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. For a summary of this, check out my TBR. I really enjoyed this book. When I started reading it, I was in exactly the right mind frame for this book. I thought that this book was going to be a shoo-in 5 stars just from the beginning. I don't know if my mental state changed about 2/3 of the way through the book, but the ending was a little lackluster for me. Maybe it's that I felt that the ending should have been more epic. I didn't feel like there was enough tension for the stakes that were presented, and the stakes were pretty high. It keeps its lighthearted tone throughout, which is fine under normal circumstances. But maybe when you're talking about the potential destruction of an entire town, you should make me feel like there's a little bit of tension and conflict. That being said, this is a very high 4-star read for me. If you like hocus pocus and practical magic, you should read this book. After the Ex Hex, I read The Last Duel by Erin Jager. If you didn't catch my video from last week, it was my book versus adaptation video. You can check that out here. I've already talked about this book at length in that video, so I'm not going to talk about it here. I will say though, considering that this was nonfiction, I really enjoyed it. This was 4 stars for me. The 5th book that I read in November was Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. Guys! I finally finished the Throne of Glass series! Woohoo! So my summary of this book does contain some very, very small, minor spoilers if you haven't read the rest of the series. Therefore, you can use the chapters below to skip to the next section. Trapped in an iron coffin, Aelin must find a way to survive, and find a way of escaping, while trusting her inner circle to do what they have to do to fight Erewhon's forces in the hopes of a better future. I used this book as my final magical readathon character building book, which was Province. And the prompt for that was to read a book with Fae or Elven characters. This means that my character, Osmanthus, is from Erythrea, which is the greenest continent in this world. So not surprising for a flower earth elemental. I talked about this book in my 10 random books tag, which you can check out down in the description box below. I thought it was a decent conclusion to the series. I won't say much more than that in order to avoid spoilers though. I rated this book 4 stars because I wasn't wowed by the conclusion. It was exactly what I expected it to be. Next, I read Diabhal by Kathleen Kaufmann. I was still in a bit of a Halloween vibe at the beginning of November, which is when I read this book, so I decided to dabble a little more into the horror genre. I saw that the 3rd book in this trilogy was up on NetGalley, so I decided to give the 1st book a listen on Audible. Diabhal follows Kate Robertson, who grows up in a kind of cult located in Venice Beach. When her mother is attacked by evil spirits, Kate is exiled and put into a group home in foster care. As she grows up, several different cults try to harness Kate's rather diabolical powers. This book was fine. I listened to this book on Audible and I did find myself intrigued by what was going on. Unfortunately, I just couldn't connect to Kate as a character. She almost has this quality about her that causes disassociation. Plus, while she is sympathetic, she definitely falls on the evil alignment of the spectrum. I did find the end of the book to be better than the beginning of the book, but unfortunately that was not enough to make me want to continue on with this series. Therefore, I rated this book 2 stars. Before I get into the last 2 full books that I read, I actually read a short story. As you know, I'm trying to get through all of the Disney canon material in chronological order. When I started, none of this High Republic stuff was out, so then I had to go back and start the High Republic. And rather than telling you the full name of the story, because it's very long, I'm just gonna call it Go Together by Charles Soule. Sorry if that's not how you pronounce your name. I'm not going to summarize this story because it would essentially give the whole story away. For a 2-page magazine article, I found this to be really enjoyable. The plot had a good beginning, middle, and end. I liked the characters, and I felt like the story had real stakes. This was 4 stars for me. So since I was reading so much in November, I decided to go ahead and add another Tarot TBR book to my list. So let's see what tarot card I drew. So for this prompt, I chose The House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. Linus, a solitary man, is a caseworker for the department in charge of magical youth. He gets asked to observe an orphanage where the children are even more unique than normal for magical youth. Like Antichrist level unique. And it becomes his job to determine whether or not these children will bring about the end of days. So I read this during my 24-hour readathon vlog, which you can also see in my description box below. There are so many links in my description box today. I loved this book. It's such a great whimsical read. The characters are all so lovable, and to watch Linus grow as a character is really rewarding for the reader. I know a lot of people said that they cried at this book. I didn't, but there maybe was some sniffling. I rated this book 5 stars. All right, and the last book that I read in November was Imajica by Clive Barker. So I actually read this as a buddy read with some people over on the Your Brain on Books Discord. I'll link the Discord server down below. There are some really fun people on that channel. Imajica follows Gentle, a master art forger, as his life unravels after reuniting with a former lover, Judith, after an assassination attempt on her life. Gentle gets pulled into a hidden dimension, 5 hidden dimensions to be exact, that are called the Imajica. As Gentle and Judith travel through the Imajica, they uncover a series of crimes and betrayals that will lead to a revelation that will literally change reality as they know it. So, this book just wasn't for me. There are a lot of really good things about it. The prose are beautiful. I also can't even imagine the imagination that it takes to write a world like this. Clive Barker is really great at not info dumping, but sometimes because his world is so complex and abstract, that actually might work against it. One thing that I also found really interesting as I read the book is that as they move through the different parts of the Imajica, the formality of the writing changes from informal to more and more and more formal depending on where they are in the Imajica. And I thought that was fascinating, and it's consistent throughout the book. The story itself is also a really interesting allegory for revelation. This book is like those professors that you find in college that say, nobody ever gets an A in my class. That's what this book reminded me of. It was this kind of, no one ever understands this book. I mean, I read it with a bunch of people who did understand it. Maybe it was just me. And I called some things before they happened that actually surprised me. Like, I didn't call it exactly, but it was enough to be like, oh, maybe I was absorbing it and just didn't realize it, but I felt pretty clueless through the whole experience of reading this book. Also, you know, connecting with characters on an emotional level is huge for me when I read a book, and I just didn't feel that with this one. It also uses rape as a plot device, and while this book is very forward-thinking about feminism, gender fluidity, and sexuality, I still just hate using rape as a plot device. It's not exactly a trigger for me, and even if it was, I don't tend to avoid triggers because I want to learn to deal with triggers, but it's just like, really? There are also gaps in the plot that can be quite jarring. You'll be reading and then something will happen and you'll be like, wait, how did we get here? I have no idea. So therefore, I rated this book 2 stars. I don't think I'll be reading Clive Barker again anytime soon, but I could be convinced to do it as another group read sometime in the future. Before we get into my TBR, if you like this video, please go ahead, like, comment, and subscribe. And if any of these books sounded interesting to you and you want to help support my channel, you can go down to the description box below and purchase them through the affiliate links. If you don't know what an affiliate link is, all that means is that if you use that link to purchase the book, I may receive a small commission. All right, so let's get into my TBR for December. So my book versus adaptation book for December is going to be Foundation by Isaac Asimov. The Empire is failing after 12,000 years. Harry Seldon is the only one who can save it. By using a new branch of science called psychohistory, Harry sees hope for the future. He leads the best minds in the Empire to a remote planet where they can serve as a beacon of hope for the future. This society is called the Foundation. I have finished the first season of the show, and my general reaction to the show is it's fine. it's not great. So normally when I start a new show, I give it what I call the rule of 3, and I do this with books as well. I will give a TV show 3 episodes to catch my attention for me to watch the rest of the series. I give books 3 chapters to grab my attention. Honestly, if I were not doing this as a book versus adaptation, I probably would have stopped after the 3 episodes. Now, I have started reading the book. I'm about 80 pages in, and I am enjoying the book actually quite a bit, but you guys will have to tune in to my book versus adaptation to find out more. The Book of the Month Club book that I'm going to read is The Keeper of Night. When half Grim Reaper, half Shinigami Ren is cast out of London for failing to control her Shinigami abilities, she travels to Japan in the hopes of finding her place with the Shinigami. In order to serve the goddess of death, she must defeat 3 yokai demons. And let's see what my tarot cards think I should read for this month. So for this prompt, I chose Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Ryland Grace wakes up in deep space, not even remembering his name. Surrounded by the bodies of his dead crewmates, he must find out who he is and what he's supposed to do. So I'm actually reading this as a buddy read with one of my oldest friends. I'm really excited about it. I've heard nothing but good things about this book, and I loved the movie The Martian, but this will be my first time reading Andy Weir. So I'm really excited about it. And that's what I read in November and what I plan on reading this month. And let's see what stories tomorrow brings.